you're on.
Mic up, might be helpful. Were we okay last night, except for when I took mine off? Okay. I'll call the City of Grande General Enterprise and Other Funds Budget Committee to order. Could I have a roll call, please?
Corey Brewster is absent excused. Steve Clemens.
Here.
Matt Barber is absent excused. Corinne Dudo.
Here.
David Glade is absent excused. Nicole Howard.
Here.
Megan Keating.
Here.
Molly King.
Here.
Marianne Wiesner.
Here.
Roxy Ogilvie.
Here.
Justin Rock. Tony Smith.
Here.
Denise Wheeler.
Here.
Joya Wong is absent excused.
All right, thank you for that. Agenda approval, generally give us an idea of what we've got on in front of us?
Yeah, I will. Thank you. In front of you, you have a memo. We literally just finished it up late. I was, as most of you know, I'm dealing with a health issue, so I apologize for a little more casual dress than normal. And it kind of addresses part of the conversation last night. Also in front of you is the underlevy sheet that you asked for. And then I also got a request for the 5-year projection that was being discussed. And so what I gave you was just the recap sheet of that. And there's also another sheet that accompanies it that I'll talk about in a couple minutes. And then also a third spreadsheet that is just kind of the past 5 years, budget to actual, because there were a number of questions last night about why are we spending so much more in this budget than we actually spent 3 years ago. And this, I think, will be a bit helpful. And will also come into play with those other sheets. And then I'll talk about the memo in more detail in a couple minutes.
Okay. So the public hearing for the proposed 2024-25 budgets and state revenue sharing is still open and shall remain open until the close of the hearings. That, could we have a recap from last night?
Yeah, thank you. So much of the conversation last night around the general fund centered on the comment that Councilor Glade made regarding the 5-year projections and the fact that we would be looking at a $1.7 million ending cash balance at the end of fiscal year 27-28. And that sparked quite a bit of discussion about should we be adding staff, should we be cutting the general fund. And one of the things that I think is important to recognize is when you talk about forecasting, you're making a lot of assumptions. And as we talked about, I think, a little bit last night, the forecast assumes that we're going to get exactly the revenue we forecast and spend every dollar that we budget, which we never do. So I asked Heather this afternoon to put together a backward look, budget to actual revenue and expenses. So that's the longer sheet that you have. And so you can see that for all of these years, we budgeted for a deficit. 18 through the most recently concluded, and every year we added to the fund balance. So the sky really isn't falling. I know at times we kind of feel that way. And if we take our average percentage of expenditures and our average percent of revenue and apply those to that December forecast, instead of $1.7 million at the end of the 27-28 year, we have $12 million. I know that won't be true, and I know the 1.7 won't be true. I don't know where it is in the middle, but it gives me a lot of confidence in what I have always believed, which is nobody has a clear crystal ball. If we'd have asked any of us in the room 5 years ago, would we have double-digit inflation on the horizon, we would have all said no. We would have been wrong. So we don't know what it's going to what's going to happen. So that's those sheets. And I'll kind of walk through the memo. So one of the suggestions that I think I heard last night to address potential shortfalls was to not transfer the money to the capital, to the general reserve. I don't think that's within the purview of the Budget Committee because that was a resolution passed by the council that established a policy to do that, and that's what the proposed budget includes. Now, the Budget Committee could make a recommendation to the council to change that policy, but they would have to do that in conjunction with the budget adoption. So I just wanted to make sure we didn't spend a lot of time on that because there is clearly established policy guidance from the council on what to do with that unanticipated increase in cash. The other question that was asked, I think Roxy asked it, about maintaining staffing levels and then spending money on capital and using fund balance. I included at the bottom of the first page kind of the excerpt about the philosophy that the council validated regarding maintaining staffing levels in programs and paying for people first, capital last, which is what the budget does. And so I think based on that, the focus really should be on the requested staffing increases. Because that I think is it's a significant dollar amount. And do we or don't we have the ability to sustain it? Because we have a couple of different projections that you see are wildly different. And I think it's important to be conservative. So I felt it important to share with you for each of these positions why I proposed them in the budget. And just to clarify, I also included the excerpt from the retreat where it shows that there was no consensus on the part of the council as to whether or not they supported adding any of these positions. The conversation was, we'll take a look at that during budget. So I know a couple of councilors were probably disappointed to see them in there when they got the budget, but there was not a consensus, and I felt very strongly that there was good rationale behind supporting the department's requests. And I'm going to touch on some stuff that we talked about last night, but just to kind of refresh and refine, and for those that were not present last night. We're asking for 2 new full-time positions in 911 dispatch. And I think the chief did a great job of talking about the call volumes, but just as a reminder, our call volumes are up 149% over 21 years, and we're essentially at the same staff that we were back then. And so you've got double the workload, and in addition, you have a lot of new regulatory requirements that impact the workload for people doing that function. It's not the same world as it was 20 years ago. The piece that I think on this one really tipped the scale towards we should put this in here in addition to the critical need, and I do see this as a critical need, was a combination of things. One, the relatively minimal impact to the city's general fund relative to the increase in service that we will get. You know, for, what is it, $60,000 or whatever the number was, yeah. We're able to add 2 positions, and in talking with members of the staff that are actually doing the job, in fact, I sat down with one of the leads while they were working on scheduling and talking about the difficulty trying to manage the 8-hour shift and get people, particularly for vacations and everything else, is quite a challenge. And as we've seen over the years, our ability to attract and retain dispatchers is pretty tough. And we believe that going to the 12-hour shift will make a huge difference, and adding those additional 2 will really put us in a position where we can impact the overtime in a positive fashion and to not have the situation where literally you have someone that is on a call that needs to use the restroom that can't because they're the only one on shift. And heaven forbid that while that same call is coming, another call comes in, and you're dealing with two very significant issues at the same time. And which do you pick, and how do you try to juggle that? And you don't pick one, you kind of have to try to do them both at the same time. So I think this one is critically important to us. The library here, and I think Carrie did a really nice job of talking about her biggest motivation being the increase in safety, which was also mine in making this recommendation, and the added hours was a bonus. This one, there's a price tag with this one. It's about $74,000 a year. We do, I think, a really good job of identifying when people need the service and flex. The time that the service is used the least is kind of in the middle of a work day, but it's hard to schedule around that. But I think that this is one that will really benefit the community. I think we owe it to the staff to make sure that they have a safe environment. And for this one, if we're not going to fund this, I think we do need to revisit how we're actually structuring and scheduling so that we don't have a situation where we have one person by themselves, and that may impact open hours. And I just want to be really upfront about that. But the Budget Committee talked about this last night, that you may have to make some tough decisions and cut things in order to pay for other things. And we've got a couple of these where if we don't do them, I think we're going to have to do something different with the service level to the public. And I want to be very clear about that. I want there to be no mistake. And it's not, we're threatening you or trying to punish you for doing it. The reality is the workload is such that we have to do something different. And our solution that I believe that we can fund is to add the staff. So in the finance department, I had actually, for some reason, had forgotten that, and I used to joke about this when I saw Eldon, that we'd replaced a finance director that had 40 years of service with a half-time employee. I would typically do that over coffee, and we would both laugh about it. But the reality was, when Eldon Slippery retired, we promoted from within and backfilled the full-time employee vacancy with a half-time position. And we're asking to restore that. And the key driver here is the workload from the paid leave Oregon that needs to be in the finance department. And as I kind of alluded to in the memo, one of the things that really makes this more critical right now is our HR generalist, who had been doing that function, apparently wanted to follow her husband out of state, and so we don't have a HR person at the time. We're covering it with 2 or 3 people. But that workload that is going to go to and remain in finance is pretty substantial. And that's a relatively nominal cost at $35,000. The Parks Aquatics, the net for that position is $42,000. You can kind of see a little matrix there on page 3. And one of the driving factors here when I was sitting down with Stu to go through this was, why do we need this? And a big piece of that is, many of you probably know Bob Leonard, who was our seasonal forever, and he could tell you where every valve and sprinkler head was in all of our parks, and he's finally decided to retire for real, and we need someone that knows that. And one of the ways to do that is to add staff in a full-time position that can be kind of the carrier of that knowledge, but also to address some of the higher needs for maintenance that we see in the pool and the parks. And also at times at City Hall, we have a maintenance person that does City Hall and library, and occasionally you will have a job that requires 2 people. And in this particular case, we're saving some money by not having to do contracted services. So I think that's, again, a lot of these, when you look at them in isolation, it's like, yeah, that makes perfect sense. I think the only reason that there's the question is when we looked at, well, what's the potential deficit that we have 5 years down the road, which I totally get. So, so now going back to these spreadsheets that we passed out, I wanted to kind of touch on some of the difference. So we know that we need to carry $1.4 to $1.6 million cash on hand to get us to November when the property taxes come. And as I kind of talked about in the agenda part, that projection that we looked at was 100% accuracy on all of our assumptions, 100% accuracy that we're going to receive every dollar we expect and that we're going to spend every dime of our budget. And even with doing that, we would still be above the 1.6 in 5 years. That under levy amount in that projection is $375,000 a year. The proposed budget is $574 and change. So one of the levers that we can pull is the under levy piece. But we wanted to be conservative when we put together that projection, said let's just plug in 375 for the under levy revenue to the general fund. And again, when putting those things together, you've got that worst case scenario of still after 5 years, if we don't change any staffing or anything, and we hit all those things, we're still above that 1.6 threshold. But if things are, if we're successful in continuing to not be able to fill positions and have the dollars that roll back in because we're not spending all of our budget, we could have lots of money. The level of service that we're providing, I think, suffers when we're not able to attract and retain folks. And that was one of the key driving factors behind the salary revisions that we did that I think are having an impact on our ability to attract and retain. So that's kind of my summary. I think we can fund it, and I think that answers the question I think two of you had asked me is, can we sustain this? And I think that we can. That's my recap.
Okay. Can I ask a quick question?
Of course.
And this is the historical budget header that you put in. Thank you very much. This is really interesting. And if I plug all those percentages in, I come up with an average of 105. But it looks like 2023 with 118% is a bit of an anomaly, and that can throw the whole thing off. It can raise that. It can skew the average carryover or difference quite a bit. But 2%, 102%, still a reasonable average. What did you use when you did the projections on that third page, which shows 12,000,007 in year 5? You use 5%?
Well, 23, you got to realize that's also the ARPA funds that we weren't expecting.
Yep.
So in the projections in this worksheet, are you looking at?
Yeah.
The new projection that shows
What did you use to get those?
an ending cash of
Take the
12,700.
revenue.
Yeah.
You'll see my increases down below. It says revenue increases, the percentages I used to increase those each year.
Okay.
But I did take into account that ARPA fund and took that money out, so I didn't, you know what I'm saying?
Yep.
Yeah.
I got it. So in other words, you didn't artificially inflate the estimates that you had.
Correct.
I like conservative financing. Makes a lot of sense. All right. Thank you for the recap, Robert. Any questions for Robert about the recap memo that he put together?
This was very helpful. These numbers are helpful.
I think it gives me some breathing room. And not being on council and not, I mean, I read about the 5-year projection paper, and this is not a criticism of the paper, it's just the fact of writing stories like that. There's always a lot more behind the story than what you get on a paper. So seeing the history, seeing the projection, And looking at the revised projection, whenever you do any modeling, you want high, low, in the middle. You want to see what the range is, and you want to see how sensitive the model is to results. What this tells me is that your projections are very sensitive to what actually happens in a given year. And the success that you've had in, estimating costs and revenues has been, is important to factor into the decision going forward and what the projection of that budget is. Even 2% difference, 102%, is going to be significant for the 5-year projection. All of that said, I think we have some things to discuss and go over. At this point, we're in a position to take public comment. I'm going to set a 5-minute limit. If anybody in the public wants to speak, then they should come to the podium and state your name, address. And if we have nobody in-house who wants to speak, then do we have anybody that submitted anything
We
online?
did not get any requests for virtual participation.
All right, then we can move on. We've had a recap. We've opened and closed any type of public hearing,
Public comments.
public comments. And now I'll open it up for committee deliberations. It's sad to see that Matt and Dave are not here. I think their input would be valuable. Matt, because of his experience on the budget. Dave, because of the concerns that he expressed last night. I think Robert's memo addresses that pretty well, but it is up to us to make a decision on what to do with the general fund budget. So, deliberations, comments.
Well, I am still going to be opposed to this budget the way it's presented, just because I think this deficit is so high. We just need to take a look at it and try to reduce it. I know when I talked with Dave last night, he was willing to go to 2%. I said 5%. Seeing some of these new projections, I would say I'm going to make a motion that we ask the city to go back and look at least a 2% reduction in the deficit.
So we have a motion to redirect the budget
Right.
back to
The city.
finance.
Yeah, the finance to take a 2% reduction in the deficit.
And you don't,
And I don't want to say where to put it. That's not I'm not the expert on that.
Okay.
I mean, like you said, we have all these experts out here who know. They might see something that they have overlooked. They think, man, maybe we can do that. A 2% is only like a $60,000 reduction, but at least it's something to start getting us down.
okay? And did I hear a second?
Second.
Okay.
I disagree. I think these numbers are a lot lower than what I had imagined looking at the budget because of the offsets, and that was what was harder to see was, how much are we going to save by having in the parks and the pool? It's going to add a little bit, but it's adding much less than I thought. And based on these 5-year projections, I think we're in decent shape.
Robert, can you give me an idea what a 2% reduction would be?
It'd be about $67,000, and I can tell you exactly what I would do.
Okay. That said, I want to point out that in your, and please correct me, in your projections and according to your memo, you've been using underfund of $375,000. Right?
Yeah, in the projection.
That would be how much revenue would come to the general fund through under levy. But there's way more than that.
This proposed budget is $200,000.
More, yes. And given the way things are happening within the district, the availability of under levy funds could be significantly more than $375,000. So, I hear what you're saying, but I think that the under levy itself is capturing all of that.
True, but the under levy,
Could I ask Steve, point of order, can we table this motion and continue the discussion? That was kind of right out of the gate. Can we do that?
I'm having a Robert's Rules moment here, sorry. We have a motion, but we don't have a second. We
have a second.
Oh, we do have a second, then we can discuss, but we can't table until we vote. And if you say you're going to table, then all discussion stops. It just needs a second and a vote.
That's
So
what I
just,
was asking.
okay,
But
use the
right out
table
of the gate,
judiciously.
Everybody had so many comments that I was,
Sorry.
no
I
problem.
think it's, thank you for that, Roxy. I think we can have as much, we have a motion, we have a second.
Second.
And the motion is redirect staff, or direct staff to reconsider the budget
right.
with a 2% cut.
And
We can talk about
The
this
2%
particular
cut
thing.
in
Deficit.
the deficit. Not the general fund budget, but the deficit. There's a difference.
Can I maybe help?
Yeah, I need to clear, I'm not sure I understand what she,
That's where I'm getting my figure, though. Sure.
So it's fair to you to understand what we would do before you vote, because I know what the answer is. It is based on the city council's guidance,
Right.
which is to fund capital less.
Right.
So what we would do is we would reduce the general fund transfer to general reserve for the requested projects from departments, which currently total $94,000. We would reduce that by $67,000 and change, and we would figure out which ones those would be. But that's where it would go. We would just take the money and not move it into the reserve for future capital expenditures. And so our programs would not be cut. We would just be reducing the amount that we're moving into the capital improvement program in the general reserve.
And what would be going into those sorts of things? Because I look at that as setting money aside to replace things when they need to be replaced and
Sure.
actually costing us less in the long run because you don't have to.
Yeah, I can tell you exactly what they are. But I'd have to sit with the directors to figure out which ones we would, what the totals would be, but $8,000 of that is in building maintenance, $5,000 in the police department for replacement of the main server, $6,000 for the replacement of consoles and dispatch, $50,000 to fire for a future ambulance, $5,000 in parks for truck replacement, and $15,000 for future playground replacements, $5,000 library for a future HVAC unit. So we would take, of those, $67,000 away.
Can I just ask a clarifying question? So when we talk about the deficit, is it true that these last 5 years we've budgeted a deficit but operated in the green?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
But that's going to run out. We're going to be using all of that within a 5-year period. And we won't have any money, perhaps. We might, like you said, we might. And then we could, just like Steve said, we could under-levy more or less or whatever.
But we don't know if that's going to happen or not. That's what's the scary
Yeah, I mean,
I think that, and the concern is legitimate because the 1.7 and, cash fund balance at the end of 5 years, in my mind, is the worst case scenario.
that, I agree.
All right? The best case scenario is we do better every year, as Megan has pointed out, by 105%. And you're slamming it, and you have 12 million.
Right.
That's a heck of a range.
And we've had that before.
Right.
And now we're not. Now we don't.
But I think, Marianne, and I understand the concern.
You've been there, Steve. You
I've
know
been
it.
there.
You know
I
what
was
you
on the council when Measure 5 and 49 hit, and
Yeah.
it was
It's
dire,
devastating.
dire,
Yeah.
dire. And we thought for sure we would dry up and blow away in 5 years.
And
And
remember-
we didn't.
I know, but remember we had to go out for asking the people for a police bond and everything to try to.
Right, but we didn't get it,
We
though.
didn't get it, no, I know.
And we still didn't dry up and blow away.
know.
And it's because They consistently overestimate expenses, underestimate revenues, and when it comes in, it's like, oh yeah, we're deficit deficit budgeting, but in reality, we're never reaching a deficit. And
That's,
I think you can attribute some of that to the expertise of our city manager and our finance.
I agree with you, they've always been very conservative.
Right. And our directors are really good
they're all
at
great.
watching the expenses and recognizing that it's better to have a little bit more, unlike the state which wants to sweep all of the excess money that happens to be out there, our directors don't do that.
Yes, they do. I'm just trying to protect us for some
Yes.
more money.
Yep. And I think the other thing that I went home thinking about last night was, it sucks to make cuts. It's one of the hardest things that we have to do, either as counselors or as budget committee
But
members.
you know, it falls onto the councilors, it's our shoulders that
Right,
have to
and it's the response, yeah, because as Dave pointed out last night, it's one of the most important responsibilities
Right.
of a counselor is fiscal situation.
Right.
I would like to call for the question, for the vote.
I was just going to say, I agree with you, I understand where you are, but I'm not going to vote for it.
that you have that prerogative.
The question has been called for, so we need to.
Yep. Could I have a roll call?
Corey Brewster,
Here.
So, yes or no?
No. Wait.
The question is to cut the general fund budget by 2% of the deficit, which is approximately $67,000.
No.
Steve Clemens,
No.
Green Dudo,
No.
Nicole Howard. No. Megan Keating,
No.
Molly King,
No.
Marianne Miesner,
Yes.
Roxy Ogilvy,
Yes.
Justin Rock,
No.
Tony Smith. No. Denise Wheeler.
Yes.
I think days have it. I have trust and faith in these people at the table.
Well, I hope so too.
And
I trust them too.
I'm not on the council anymore, so I don't have to face the music, but,
Which sounds like the council has a lot of work to do this year.
Yes, we do.
And we will make sure that we do.
And we're not saying that we doubt them. We are just worried. We just want to make
We
sure
are all worried about
that
it.
we're covered.
That's right.
And so that's the only reason why.
okay, I get that.
My major concern is Robert's not going to be here forever. He's a short timer. I don't know when, but we know he's moving on.
I
And
don't
it
know, some of
takes,
us just are going to be reelected, so.
it takes one bad manager
Yeah.
to run us into the hole. And so,
That's why we gotta
Robert, if
make
you'll
sure we
agree
pick a
to
good
will
one.
stay, I will change my vote.
All right.
He's smiling.
Do we have any other conversation or discussion, deliberation about the current budget as it's presented?
I think that was a good discussion. That was
It was,
helpful. That was helpful.
It was a good discussion.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. Any other questions? All right, so I would invite a motion to close the public hearing and approve the general fund budget for 24-25.
Second.
I need a motion.
Oh, you need a motion. Would you like a motion?
I would like a
I
motion.
thought you
It's a
make,
very specific motion that has to be read in its entirety.
I move that the public hearing for the city's general fund budget for fiscal year 2024-2025 be closed, and that the ad valorem property tax rate of 7.4392 per $1,000 of assessed value be imposed for the general fund, and that the general fund budget be approved as presented and forwarded in its entirety to the City Council for adoption during the regular session of the City Council on June 5th, 2024.
second.
Right. We can have discussion about this, if you like, or,
I would just call for the vote.
okay. Can I have a roll call vote, please?
Corey Brewster,
Yes.
Steve Clemens,
Yes.
Green Dudo,
Yes.
Nicole Howard,
Yes.
Megan Keating,
Yes.
Molly King,
Yes.
Mary Ann Meisner,
No.
Roxy Ogilvy,
No.
Justin Rock,
Yes.
Tony Smith,
Yes.
Denise Wheeler.
I'm just blank. No.
Motion passes.
Thank you.
Now it's time for Kyle to take the hot seat. Unless he wants to bring all his answer the question.
Now, he's hoping we won't ask him any questions, that's why he dressed up, but it's not going to
You can
happen.
always get your clearance.
All right, so we're doing Public Works, and we're going to start with Public Works labor. Just, I guess in my mind, there's not much to argue about here, because you got to pay who for the work. This is a way to do that. But, that said, any questions about the labor budget? Labor fund? I'm going to give people a moment just to kind of get oriented. Questions? Personnel Services Fund. Let's talk water. Water. When we were on the tour, by the way, those of that missed the tour, wow, it was a great day. We really appreciate it. Learned a lot about the city, learned about some of the concerns. One of the concerns I have is about the well. Under capital outlay, we're now at 900,000. Is that for the well or for something else?
So the well is actually covered under the reserve.
Okay.
So capital outlay for this year, the main primary focus of the water department is to get out in front of all of those paving projects we want to get done and change out bad services.
Okay.
So that's where the majority of those maintenance funds and rehab funds are going to go.
At what point are you going to need to, how many years out do you think you'll need, will it be before you put the new well in?
Well, while we have no pressing concerns for daily water production, really we're just trying to set ourselves up in the future. What we know is we have a well that underproduces, it's not meeting our requirements, so we want to make sure that the water is available when we need it in the future. So our master plan doesn't call out us needing any additional water on a day-to-day basis for the next 20 years, but 20. So, but we do anticipate, on those really hot days in July when everybody wants to water their lawn at 12 o'clock in the afternoon, we want to make sure that we don't run those reservoirs down and start sending dirty water. So it's an interesting balance between having enough water and providing quality water.
Quick question, and this is something the council would know. When was the last time you increased water rates, and when do you anticipate?
We last increased water rates in 2017.
Okay.
We did not ask for a rate increase this time. We're kind of operating off of the idea that if we come to you when we need money, we want to have that confidence that we actually need it. We consistently watch our fund balances, we watch our reserve funds. We haven't seen a decreasing fund balance in the last 5 years, so there's really no reason at this point to run after it. But we all know the current conditions with raising interest rates, rising labor costs, material shortfalls, supply chain issues, so great. Don't know for sure, but I would estimate at least 2 years out unless something crazy happens.
Make sure that is very clear to people. You have not raised water rates in 7 years.
Correct.
That's pretty significant considering what is happening in other communities around us. So thank you for that.
Thank
Any
you.
other questions for Kyle on water? All right, water reserve. This is where you collect money for the new well.
Correct. So we run most of our capital projects out of the reserve fund.
Questions here? All right, motor pool. this is, looks like it's dual purpose. Lex money for new vehicles for all of the city?
No, the vehicle side is just for Public Works. It's basically our own rent-a-center. We do run fuel for the city through this budget.
Okay. Questions on the motor pool?
So this would not be the van that the Parks and Recs would be interested in, it's totally separate then? It's not part of the motor pool?
So Parks and Recs and the police will fuel their vehicles through this.
Yeah, so we purchase the fuel, and then we maintain the vending system, and then we just charge them on a monthly basis. A little bit, I think it's 12 cents on the gallon.
Yeah.
Yeah. Need to raise that
Does the
someday.
fire department use you too then?
Yes, they
They
do.
do, they thought so.
All right, questions on motor pool? Our favorite? Streets and roads.
So as a preemptive for this one, street and road budget is primarily a maintenance budget. This does not cover capital improvements, and when we're talking maintenance, we're talking things like chip seals, crack sealing, potholing, signs, sweeping, all of the little tasks that go along with maintaining the transportation system. We'll occasionally throw in a larger maintenance item like a thin overlay or something like that when we have the funds, but this is primarily maintenance dollars.
I have sort of one line item near and dear to my heart and my legs, my bum. That's the bike and pedestrian paths. So it's been going up over the last 3-4 years. What are you going to do for $30,000? What's the, I mean, that's like the highest it's been in several years.
Yeah.
What's the plan?
There's been a general trend, especially in the last year, of seeing a lot more interest in pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure. So with this 30,000, we think we can tackle one of the larger projects that's always been on the radar. One that's near and dear to a lot of people's heart is the 2nd Street near Central. That may come up if we can't find funds in another place. My personal favorite is the crossing from Island on Monroe, from Island to Spruce. There's currently no sidewalk infrastructure there. It's a horribly dangerous intersection. Been wanting to do something with that one for a long time. So those are some of the ones that I think are high on the capital list this year.
Yep, all right. Any other questions on street and road maintenance types of stuff?
I just want to thank him for the painting of Adams. It looks very nice.
Oh, what did we paint? That might have been the state.
What? Oh, the state, that's right, I know the state does, but I thought maybe you did it locally, but it's the sidewalks and all, I mean, the crossings and all that?
Oh, we do the crosswalks.
Oh, that's what I thought, so yes, thank
Yep,
you.
we do the crosswalks. Thank
Looks
you.
very nice.
Thank you.
Any other questions on street and road maintenance? Let's go to street fund reserve. I'm assuming this is where you collect resources for bigger projects, is that right?
Yeah, so street reserve, we run a lot of the capital projects out of. This would be most of your grants. This would be money that comes down from the feds or the states. This is where we do a lot of the larger projects through.
Questions here?
Did we get the grant for the safe solution, the safe route, or is it still in the process?
The first round of applications has been in, and the second one is due at the middle or end of July, and then they'll make a decision. So we have two, one that was funded by the city of LaGrande, well, one that was put forth by the city of LaGrande, one that was put forth by ODOT for inside the city of LaGrande, and we have two of the top 3 rated projects in Region 5. So high hopes, but there's always limited funding, and it just depends on how they decide.
Do we have a timeline when we'll know?
I think they said that they were going to award somewhere around November, December in hopes of hitting the 25
that
construction
far out?
season.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
Street reserve fund, anything else? Okay, now I'm confused. Now we have one called street maintenance,
Yeah.
and you just told us that street and road was maintenance. Now,
So street maintenance is our user fee. This is the one that's assessed on your water bill every month. These funds can be used for overlays, which are considered maintenance, but I can't use them for usually crack sealing, potholing, anything else like that. This is mainly reserved for grant matching and larger projects on fully developed streets, which is a caveat.
You just did one now, didn't you, because there's the street closures on Washington.
Today, we did some paving on Spring, but those were ARPA funds.
Well, those are, oh, okay.
Those are your ARPA funds at work.
Yep, all right.
Between what,
So-
4th and Washington, right?
We went from 4th to Washington. We do have plans on doing 4th to 2nd, using some of the other funds that we have coming in through actually this budget. We just have some storm sewer and sanitary sewer problems to fix first.
Okay, and when is 12th Street going to be?
As soon as we can get those bid documents out and get a contractor on board, we anticipate it being done this construction season.
Those are ARPA funds too, aren't they?
Correct.
The ARPA funds, you have projects this year and then next year we'll finish them up?
Next year, they have to be spent.
Okay, all right. Okay, any questions on street maintenance? User fee.
User fee.
All right, that finishes streets and roads.
When was the we haven't raised user fees for a long, long time, have we?
Yeah, I want to say like maybe 2012
That-
was the final raise. It was a
Raising
long time ago.
Aren't they capped?
They are capped by resolution.
Right, but,
By resolution, no.
yeah, so they're capped, but isn't there a state limit on them?
We have historically not looked at going beyond that, is it $8?
Yeah.
Because it would require a complete rewrite. You know, we've been hesitant to do that.
Okay,
What did you say about we require?
We've been hesitant to do that.
Oh, like you said, we're required to do something if we were going to raise them.
Yeah, we'd have to redo the ordinance.
Oh, yeah, I know that one, okay. But no state law or anything?
No, there's, for this particular one, there have been challenges in the past in other jurisdictions as to whether or not this is a tax that requires a vote of the people.
Okay.
And so we have chosen to stay within the parameters of the current ordinance.
have a reliable source than have it taken away.
Yes.
Sorry, Marianne, I didn't mean to move
That's
on.
okay, no, that's okay, I just thought of it after you started to go.
Okay.
Okay,
Any
thanks.
other questions before we move off of streets? All right, storm utility fee. This is snow removal. I seem to remember stormwater plan for the lower end of Geckler. There was some work done there. I think that this covered. Any questions on the storm utility fee fund?
So the estimated this year is higher than the budget? Is that because we had stuff roll over?
Which one are you looking at?
Storm utility.
Oh, the beginning cash?
Yeah.
Yeah, so on a lot of these, especially some of the material and surfaces line, like storm sewer rehab, storm sewer maintenance, which is under, storm sewer maintenance is under materials and services, storm sewer rehab is under capital. We'll budget money for projects, but they aren't the high on the list projects. They're kind of work fillers for when we get our other stuff that needs to get done. Sometimes we get those done, sometimes we don't. So that beginning cash rollover that comes in higher than the budget just means that we didn't get some of that. It could also mean that we didn't plow a lot of snow.
Yeah, and you made a lot of interest.
Yes, we love interest. Heather's doing us a great job this year.
We didn't have a lot of snow this year either. No.
We didn't have a lot of snow. We did sweep, we had that 1 week that was, the meteorological estimates this year have been, the forecast has been rough, so.
We had that 1 week of snow and cold, and then winter was done.
Yeah, and it went from 20 inches on Tuesday to ending up with like 6 by Friday, and we were like,
And is that what you're calling storm events?
Yes.
we also handle flood mitigation, so when we get the large storms or snow melt, we'll go out and make sure that the storm system's flowing properly.
Any more questions on the storm utility? Reserve fund, storm utility reserve fund. So last year, you budgeted for capital outlay 700,000 again this year. What is being done with 700,000?
So the 700,000 is for the replacement of the culvert over Geckler Slough on 18th Street.
Oh, yeah.
And so last year, the opportunity through FEMA came up for us to apply for some what they call BRIC or flood mitigation assistant funding, which would pay for, I think, around 70% of the project. I would rather use their money than our money. So we're waiting for the end of that grant process to see whether we're successful or not, but we did budget the funds that if we're not successful, we can move forward with the project.
Any other questions on the storm utility reserve fund? Right. Wastewater treatment. So the treatment is the facility out on the highway.
Correct.
Collection are all the pipes.
And the lift stations in town
Right. And then the reserve is for collecting.
for capital improvement projects.
Collecting funds, not collecting sewer.
Correct.
Questions on wastewater treatment? For those of us that went on the tour, we saw the new intake facility
Yep.
and new screening that'll be in place that will help, and learned about bugs in the water and how you didn't have enough good bugs, and so that made it smelly. And, you know, curious to know what happens with the guy that comes in with the bugs.
I think that's outside of the scope of the budget.
Yes, I know. But it is treatment.
It is treatment.
It's not part of this budget.
I do have a question. Continue to complete toxicity reduction evaluation, toxicity identification evaluation, phase 3. What is that?
Those are DEQ requirements. So as most people know, we have a permit that expired in 2008. So what Lyle has to do in his budget is have some semblance of an idea or a guess of what DEQ is going to do with us when they actually come around to give us a permit. So there are certain things that he identifies that DEQ puts out that he is getting ahead. One of the best things about Lyle is he has backups for his backups, and he has the foresight years in advance, so we usually have...
And he's never retiring, is he?
I would not count on that, but...
And he's never retiring, is he? We will lose a huge historical database when you go, so.
Yeah, Lyle also presents one of the problems of he's our only level 3 operator who can operate the wastewater treatment plant under DEQ's requirements, so.
And are you training somebody below him?
We always try and grow them in-house, but it's a prevailing problem in workforce in operators in the state of Oregon. They're slim, hard to come by, and hard to keep around.
Okay. Do what you can. Wastewater treatment, any other questions? Right, sewage collection.
Sewer reserve.
And sewer reserve fund.
Sludge.
Anything? That wraps up sewer. I think that wraps up public works. So, thank you, Kyle. And thank you all for all the other ones that showed up this evening. Appreciate it. Grants and donations. Robert, this is basically a placeholder for the possibility that these things can come in.
Correct.
I had a question. You were giving us the review the other night, and what happens when you have unanticipated, somebody passes away and they bequeath $500,000 to parks? How do you account for that?
So the way that the budget law is structured is you cannot exceed your budgeted appropriations. So the nice thing about the grants and donations budget is we have budgeted a tremendous amount of money some of which we are pretty sure we're not going to get. So if we did have a situation where we got an unanticipated grant, we may be able to still access it because we have room within the appropriation.
Gotcha.
If someone came with a $500,000 grant, I don't know that we would be able to expend all of that. But we have room within this budget for smaller grants that come in, that we are able to do that.
Okay. It just struck me because knowing this is things that you've either applied for or you think you're going to apply for, but there's always the possibility.
Right.
So if you don't have any money, like, I see miscellaneous has never had anything in it.
But Robert doesn't like miscellaneous.
So is this so is it something that could be filled in with a grant at some point? If you, let's say somebody gave you a grant of something, could you?
Well, we do have, so if you look, so are you looking on the revenue side or are you looking
I'm looking at the donation funds.
Yeah.
on the resources?
Yes.
Budgeted for it last year too, yeah.
So there's a miscellaneous line in the resources.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
So if something came in that didn't fit into any of these other categories, we would receive it into miscellaneous.
Okay. Even though you don't have anything requested for it or budgeted for it. It doesn't matter, but, okay.
And you don't budget revenues anyway.
Oh, well, that's true. You can't, that'd be kind of hard.
Yeah. But we need to make sure that we have allocated sufficient resources to cover the expenditures.
Okay, got it.
All right, any more questions about grants and donations? General Reserve Fund? This is where some of the money, the unanticipated cash carryover
Yes.
comes into here. Does it, no, sorry, only some of it does, or it's all of it just gets parsed out.
Just some of it.
Just some of it. So, go ahead.
It's 50% of the unanticipated.
Okay, good, thank you. The other 25 goes someplace here, and another 25.
25 stays in the general fund and 25 goes to street.
Any questions on general?
The reserve fund, what's the general CIP? What's CIP?
Capital improvement plan, it's just
Okay.
how we titled that. I talked about this during the kind of the overview. That's the 300,000 that we have there in case we have something happen like the
Right.
chief's car.
I just wasn't sure about the acronym, what it stood for.
Yeah, CIP is capital improvement plan.
That's, CIP is capital improvement projects plan.
Fine.
Any other questions? That does it. All right, at this point, I open the podium for public comments on the enterprise and other fund budgets only. Anyone in the public, in the audience? No? Any virtual comments or questions?
No.
All right, committee deliberations on the enterprise funds, enterprise and other funds. They're pretty straightforward, these, because they're self-funded or they're placeholders or they're money that's been gathered and collected and held in trust for potential projects. These are, as they always have been, some of the easiest ones to go through. No deliberation, no comments? Then, let's see.
You need a motion.
So I'm not hearing any discussion on this, so I'm going to close the public hearings for fiscal year 24, 25 budgets and state revenue sharing. I'll entertain a motion to approve the enterprise and other funds budget.
I move that the enterprise and other fund budgets for fiscal year 2024-25 be approved as presented and forwarded in its entirety to the City Council for adoption during the regular session of the City Council on June 5th, 2024.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Can I have a roll call vote, please?
Corey Brewster,
Yes.
Steve Clemens,
Yes.
Rain Dudo, Nicole Howard,
Yes.
Megan Keating,
Yes.
Molly King,
Yes.
Mary Ann Meisner,
Yes.
Roxy Ogilvy,
Yes.
Justin Rock, Tony Smith,
Yes.
Denise Wheeler.
Yes.
Right. Motion passes. You have a budget for next year, at least one to give to the council. Before I adjourn, just a reminder to the Budget Committee, if you please can make it to June 5th meeting. It's the only meeting in the City Council's schedule where we have 4 parts. Budget Committee, and then you have the District Committee, and while sat on that, both those committees, you have the vote approving the minutes. And then it's kind of interesting to sit back and watch to see what the council and the urban agency have some leeway. And finally, thank staff and everybody for being here. We made it through 2 nights. Appreciate it. Robert,
Thank you.
and with that, adjourn the budget to approve minutes and at the council session on June 5th.
Thanks, everybody.